I think it's safe to say that every parent wants the best for their child, right? The best possible future they can actually create for them. So I think it's fair to say that. And I'm actually a new parent, right? I have a 1.5-year-old, or almost 1.5 daughter. And I want to make sure that I can be the best parent possible. I want to be there for her in any way that I can. And what I'm doing is I'm pretty much just documenting this on YouTube because I love to read for one, and I'm using my passion for reading to read about parenting so I can become a better parent. So if that's interesting to you, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you follow so that way, we can go on a journey together. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to share what I learned with you, and if you have any questions, any feedback, leave it in the comments. So I'm actually going to be sharing a poster that I'm looking at right now, but I'm gonna share with you in a second. But it's a poster, and this poster is basically going to show you about setting limits on your child's behaviors. Because in the book that I'm reading, John Gottman, Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child, he says that you need to make sure that you set limits, right? Your child needs to know what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and what's sometimes acceptable. So that's what I'm gonna go through those three categories. And it's pretty much calling like you're setting a limit on their behaviors. So that's what a good parent should do. And you've probably looked at situations where parents will let the kid just do whatever. Like I've seen stuff like on YouTube or TikTok, for example, like where the kid is just just swearing at their parents, and their parents just like doesn't respond. So it's just like that's what they call like a laissez-faire parent. Laissez-faire is just like you don't set any limits. You're just like, hey, hopefully time will take care of it. But you don't want to do that type of parenting. You want to make sure that the kid understands well that there's a limit to what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And one of the things I want to point out is that a lot of it does come down to your values. So every single family is going to have their own values, and those are going to be the opportunities you're going to have whenever it comes down to problem solving, which I'm probably not going to get into this video, but I will in the future. We're going to talk about how to problem solve, and that's where the big part, the meat of it all happens, where you can help raise their emotional intelligence. But again, in this one, I want to show you how to set limits. So John Gottman in the book pretty much breaks it down into three categories. And I want to pretty much just go over the three categories, like on the limits. That way you just have a framework to work with, something to come up with for your family and to get a better idea. So hopefully I'm able to show you that in this video. So what we have in front of us is pretty much a poster I created based on what I'm reading in the book right now. And in this section, in one of the sections, I believe it was on chapter 3, there's talking about setting behavior limits. And earlier in the previous videos, I talked about the three types of parenting there are. So you have like your dismissive parent, you have a disapproving parent, and you also have the laissez-faire parent. And then the other one is where we want to be which is called the emotion coach. An emotion coach is pretty much where you want to be at. You want to create a child that will be emotionally intelligent, because when they come across tough situations in their lifetime, you want them to persevere, to be able to go through them. Because you're not going to create someone that's going to be emotionless. They're still going to feel emotions, but you're going to make it so that they can bounce back much faster, because they're going to be confident in their ability to problem solve their way through it. So that's what I'm learning from this book so far, and it's really good. But one of the things that I want to talk about in this video is pretty much setting behavior limits. And what they talked about in terms of setting behavior limits are, they broke it down to three categories. So I created a stoplight, as you can see here, because, or a traffic light, because pretty much it kind of goes with what's going on in terms of setting limits. So at a stoplight, right, when you go to a stop sign or a traffic light, you get to a red light, you got to stop. Yellow light means proceed with caution. And then you have a green light, which means you can go. Well, when it comes to setting behaviors, limits to behaviors, it's the same idea. They're going to follow this type of a pattern. And there's things that they can be, that they're not going to be accepted, and that's going to be like in the stop section, a red light, meaning that there's certain behaviors we're going to have that are not acceptable at all. Then you're going to have something like a yellow light, meaning you proceed with caution. So it's like something that is a behavior that is not really tolerated, but it depends on the circumstances that you have in front of you. And then the other section is, or the other light is to go, right? Green light means to go. And in this case, those are behaviors that are okay with you, that you're willing to accept no matter what. So I want to go over each one in this poster so you can kind of get an idea of how to read it, how to interpret it, and how to apply it for yourself. So you can see here for the red light to stop. right? It says here that we have behaviors that's never acceptable. And I just came up with a couple of examples. Again, there's a whole bunch of different things you can come up with, but these are just some main things that the book was talking about, or I decided to throw in there myself. But basically, you can see here that some of the behaviors they talked about were like, it's never going to be acceptable to either harm yourself or someone else, right? That's just something that you just don't accept. Or, for example, illegal activities. You shouldn't be doing drugs. You shouldn't be stealing from people, right? It's illegal. So that it's a line you can't cross. That's just like there's not gonna be a situation where we're like, oh, it's okay. And then the other one is cheating in school. I threw that in there because I'm a teacher, so I know that I'm gonna tell my daughter, that cheating that's tied to integrity, right? So you want to have integrity. So I'd rather have you fail a test because you didn't study and learn from that, rather than to cheat. Because when you start to cheat, it comes down to the fact that you're just trying to get a good grade and you're losing sight of the whole purpose of school, which is to learn and empower yourself with knowledge that you could potentially use for your future. So I just threw that in there. But there's going to be some behaviors that you want to identify. And again, it's going to come down to your family values. What do you really think is important? What are things that you should not cross? But in the things that are, never acceptable, it's stuff really that it could be harmful to themselves. Like, it's like something that's just like, no, there's no way we're going to even have a discussion about it. All right, so that's one section. The other one is caution. So caution is behaviors that is going to be tolerated in certain situations. And in the book, they talked about some of the things like that you see here, where it's like, you can have, let's say somebody from a family member passes away, right? That's going to upset your child. Anybody would be upset. And it's possible that your child might, behave differently than what they typically behave like. So you can understand where they're coming from. You can let them know that it's not acceptable what they're doing, but you understand why they're doing it. So it's, you're understanding you're not going to deny their emotions. You're still going to say, I understand why you're feeling this way, why you're acting out this way. I want to make sure, you understand it's not acceptable, but I understand. So it's pretty much, those are the types of behaviors that it just depends on the situations. For example, like right now I'm trying to help my daughter, or we're trying as a family trying to make sure that she eats, but it's very difficult because she doesn't want to sit there for, or she just doesn't want to eat sometimes. She'd rather run around and do a couple bites and then go back, run around again and get a couple bites. But she doesn't want to sit down for a meal for like 30 minutes straight. She's just not ready for that yet. So we can tolerate her getting distracted. It's just not, she's not capable yet because she's only not even 1.5 yet. The other one is, examples was like attitude. So like, let's say someone's going through a divorce, then that's going to affect the child in a certain way, and they might act out differently. They might give you attitude, things like that. Same thing, you can let them know that it's not it's not acceptable what they're doing, but you understand. So it's kind of like you're giving them a little bit of leeway, and you're a little bit of a chance to kind of vent out, but you're still telling them that it's not acceptable, but you understand where they're coming from. All right, so that's what I mean by caution. So it's, or like they're stressed out, so they happen to skip their chores for a day. So it's like, so things that is just not their typical behavior. So something is causing them to perform, to behave differently, and you just proceed with caution. So you just let them know that it's not acceptable, and but you understand where they're coming from, but it's just not acceptable what they're doing, and you try to tolerate it for a little bit. So it's almost like you're giving a little bit of flexibility, given the circumstance. And then the other section was the green light, go. And that's pretty much behaviors that is always acceptable no matter what. And again, it comes down to family values. So it's really going to be different for everybody, but you might have some things that are similar. Like, for example, when it comes to behaviors that's not acceptable, I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't want their kids doing drugs or stealing or hurting themselves or hurting other people. All right, but these are some, some ideas as to what can go into it. But again, family values are going to impact the types of things you put here, especially for like, what do you find to be acceptable at any time? So some things that I was thinking of was like reading books. I already know I love reading books. So I'm not gonna ever stop my daughter from reading books. Like, why would I do that? And doing their chores, like, of course I want you to do chores. So I'm not gonna ever tell you that don't do your chores. And then the other one is like helping other people out. So what do you want your child to be like? Contribute to the society, helping others. Another one I was thinking was like always giving out. Giving mom and dad a hug or something like that, right? Those are things that are freely acceptable. So those are things you want to come up with. So what are some behaviors that are acceptable? And then eventually I'm going to tie into this. The book's going to talk about like consequences So what should you do if they're doing behaviors that's not acceptable? What kind of consequences should you provide that will fit, kind of like what they say, punishment fits the crime. So what kind of consequences could you give that are, going to be, I guess you could say, appropriate for whatever they did? Because it's important, they said that, in the book they said that it's important that your child knows, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. So that's kind of like what this poster is for. And then they should also know the consequences, because they said that when a child is aware of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and what the consequences are, they're more willing to listen, to accept the consequence. So more willing meaning, it doesn't mean they're going to be like, okay, I did this, I was bad, or I did something on the never acceptable list, so I'll take my consequence, and that's it, without a fight. It just says that they're going to be more willing to, because they're understanding that, you laid it out clearly, and, rules could be broken, but it doesn't mean that they're going to follow them just because they know it's there. So they're just saying it's going to be more willing, they're going to be more willing to participate because of the fact that they know what the circumstances were. Is not a surprise. And that's pretty much it so far. So in the next video, hopefully I'm going to come up with some consequences as to, like, in terms of, like, what I talked about in this poster, and it'll build upon this as well. So again, these are just examples only, and again, you want to define them based on your family values, and that's pretty much it. So I hope you liked this video. Hit the like button if you did. Leave any comments, any feedback, questions if you have, and make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And be on the lookout. I'm going to be coming up with other playlists as well in the future.